Hey guys, and welcome back to my creative and crafty little corner of YouTube. So today's video is part 3 in what became a little bit of a mini series, if you will, on color mixing with paint. And so the first one, we talked about all the primary colors, we made a color wheel, and then in the second one, we did our complementary colors to show you how to get all those middle colors, those neutral browns and weird icky colors that actually can be beautiful, okay? And in this video, we're talking about tint, tone, and shade. So tint is when we add white paint to a color and make it lighter. And then when we tone it, we're actually adding what's called a, oh my God, what is it called? Like a, not natural gray. Oh
my God, I'm having a brain fart.
A true gray to the color to kind of tone it out, darken it, and then of course when we do shade, we're adding black to the color to make it darker, so you'll be able to see kind of how the tone and the shade are a little bit different, so you could use those for different reasons. And then I am also going to take one of those complementary colors from the last video that I promised I would do and lighten it with white paint so that you could see how the progression of that brown sort of changes, and that way when you see a lovely tan color on something, you'll know which complementary colors rather to use to get the base color, and then what you'll need to do with it to make it the shade that you really want it to be. So without further delay, let's just jump in, start mixing some colors and playing around. Here we are back with our handy dandy color wheel with all of the good information. And so today we're going to focus on tint, tone, and shade. One thing I like about this color wheel is it has all the basic definitions of everything. So you can see right here, tint, when we tint a color, it's adding a color plus white. Tone is a color plus gray. And shade is a color plus black. And down here, it has our scale, right? This is supposed to be 100% black, which, I mean, it is. I'm not arguing that. So we start with 100% black, and then we move through. So this is the grayscale, and then it sort of skips over to here. We have it continuing 6 through 10, and then on the other end is white. So you have your black and your white, and by mixing those two together, you get that sort of what people call true gray. Okay, so that's the black and the white, and they come together. So here's one I have that I did way long time ago in school with pencil, and you can see how we did, starting with nothing right here, just the paper, and using the pencil. This was a learning technique of pencil, you know, shading and all of that stuff, trying to get it as dark as possible by the end. And something similar with paint. Let me move that so it's not so shiny. Same kind of thing. Oh, it's coming loose. And that's what we're going to be working on today. So here we have sort of the darkest tone, and then it's moving to the lighter tone of the color. And this is what I was talking about with the yellow in the previous video. You can see where it starts to go green as we add that black in there, right? So anyway, let us play with that today. So this color scale, or this value scale rather, value scale, has just 10 spaces. I counted on these are 11 squares. We're gonna do the 11 squares because in my brain, that just makes more sense because we're going to be mixing our colors. I'm gonna use red as an example. I feel like that's a good one to use. But if we're trying to meet in the middle to find what would be sort of the grayest of grays, I feel like you have to have 11. Like there has to be 1 in the middle and then 5 on each side. That's just how my brain works. If you just want to do 10, just do 10. That's fine too. Still get the general idea. Now the other thing is this could honestly go on for miles, right? If you're, especially when you're using paint, because you can go very subtly and it could stretch on for days. So if you want to play with that, feel free to play with that. But for today's purposes, we're just going to do squares of 11. So I am going to be working with Bristol paper again, just like I did in the other 2 videos. I do like Bristol paper. It's a nice versatile paper, and it's what I mostly have at home. So this is just a smaller piece because we're just doing a few little boxes of squares, and you'll notice this ridiculously large yardstick that I have because I don't know where my little lovey pink roller is that I used in the other video to make squares. I'm kind of sad about that. But use what you have, right? And this is what I have. So we're gonna make our little bars. So initially I'm kind of finding the center of the paper because I thought if you wanted to do 2 bars across the top and 2 across the bottom to make it look nice and neat and even, that would work, because initially I thought I was only going to need 4, but you will see as we go along that I realized I actually needed 5 of these, because the first one I'm going to be demonstrating just the grayscale with black and white, and then the tint, tone, shade, and then also I'm adding the complementary color. You don't have to add the complementary color, so honestly, if you just want to do 4, that works, but I'm just measuring off 1 inch on the edges and then going across to meet them, and then marking off 1 inch squares. So 11 inches total, and then going in and trying to make nice, neat, tidy little squares. And as we go along with this, you will notice I start out pretty strong, being pretty neat about everything, but you will also see as we go along why we tend to do things in pencil, because it's easy to erase. But yeah, so this is you know, just trying to keep it neat and organized. If it's not perfect, please don't stress out about it. The main idea here is to get a feel for the color mixing, so you can start seeing what the paint does as you're mixing it. And you honestly don't even necessarily need to do the squares if you're not worried about it. I was trying to make it look a little bit professional. It definitely does not turn out to be something that I would have ever dreamt of turning in for a college course because my ADHD and my mom life started interfering at points, and so I got a little distracted a few times. But again, make it as neat as you want to, make it sloppy if you want to. The idea is to learn about the mixing. So here we have the 4 boxes, and I'm just going to write down what I'm doing for each one so that I can remember in theory, to help me remember. So on the top, we're doing the grayscale. We're going to start with black paint on one end and just white paint on the other end. And then we're going to meet that in the middle for what is going to be, I'm going to call our mid gray, which is the gray that we're going to use when we go in for our toning. Okay, and then the next one, we're doing red on one end, and then the lightest red, or darkest red rather, on the other end, and then red on one end, the lightest red on the other. So the top one, we're adding black, the bottom one, we're adding white. And then for the last one, we're going to do actually here our tone, but I forgot about the tone because I just got all excited about mixing that complementary color. So we'll come back to that in another frame. But for that last box, you could do your red and just know that that's your tonal one. Okay, so starting out, I'm just taking my golden paints that I have used in all the other videos. You can see that my titanium white is almost empty. It gets used a lot. I'm using cadmium red medium hue and Mars black. And so the first thing we're going to do, make sure you have clean water, a towel to clean your brushes off with in between. I've got these 2 different brushes to see which one I like the best, and my handy dandy ancient, much used, much loved palette knife. So for the very top one, we're starting with black and white. And so I'm just going to take my black paint straight out of the tube, paint it into the box as neatly as possible. And you can see I started out with this brush. I didn't love how it was leaving some sort of fuzzy edges there, which is making it hard to make it as clean and neat as I wanted to, which again is ironic because later in the video you'll see things get a little ADHD and a little sloppy. But so I did end up switching brushes just to kind of get into those corners a little easier. But just going in with the black paint here, and then on the other end with a very clean brush and clean water, going in with the white paint. Now the reason I'm not just leaving it white the way that I did with the color, or with the pencil rather, is because, you know, this way I can see what the white paint itself looks like. In case you're using a paper that's not completely white, you know, in case you are using a paint, I don't know if there might be a paint that isn't completely white, but anyway, with the paint, we're going in and painting that square. So now we are going to create our mid gray. So I'm just adding a bit of black and a bit of white, trying to get it about equal amounts, just to see how that turns out. And I've mentioned this in the other videos. I'm going to go ahead and mention it again here. When you are mixing paint, you want to make sure you mix it until you absolutely don't see any streaks of color. You should only see a very solid color. So in this case, no more streaks of black or white or any shades in between. It should all end up being one solid, same color of gray by the time you're done mixing. And I end up being pretty happy with this, so that is what we're just going to roll with for today in what I think is a nice, decent sort of middle gray between this Mars Black and Titanium White. So I'm going to go in and paint that middle square in, and this is what we're going to use when we do our toning as well. All right, so now you can see I did not have enough, so I just went ahead and remixed a bit and added, just did another dab of black and dab of white to make a little more because I did not mix enough to begin with to work with. So I'm separating these two out, and for one I'm going to add black, to the other one I'm going to add white. Clean water, once again, clean palette knife. So we're going to start out going toward the black end of our scale. So I'm adding just the tiniest bit of black paint here. Less is more when you are doing this to really see the differences. If it ends up being a little different than mine, that's okay. This is why I say it could go on for days. This is all about getting an idea, getting used to the paint, learning what the paint basically is going to do when you're mixing it. So don't be too stressful. And here I go making my first major oopsie of today. I'm putting it in the wrong square. I'm honestly not sure where my brain went with this. I was very excited, did a great job painting it in, and then realized I needed to paint that next to the mid-gray because we were adding the black to the mid-gray gradually. So we're gonna do that where we just mixed and put it to the left of our middle gray square. Fill that in and do the right thing. And if you find that this happens or you paint a wrong square, that's one thing I love about acrylic paint. It is easy to paint over, especially because this is subtle. Got the right one there. Yay. So now we're moving toward the left. Again, we're just going to add the tiniest little bit of black. That's actually not super tiny, but we're going to add just a little bit of black to the one we just mixed a moment ago. Mix it really, really well. And we're going to just keep going down the row that way. One thing to keep in mind, and one reason I actually was kind of glad that I made that mistake, is this is a good example of seeing how subtly this can be and how sometimes you just have to trust the process, especially when the colors go darker, because it's harder for our eyes to kind of see those differences. Okay. So again, just going in with just a little bit of black paint and mixing once again. Okay. Just adding a bit more. And now you can really see the dramatic difference with where I made the mistake square and now the darker square. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind because it's so gradual. So it's kind of like if you compare your paint to one of the lighter colors. I hope that makes sense. You can actually start seeing that there is a difference, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And now one more time, adding just a little bit more black to what we've already mixed. And now I'm just going to paint over my oopsie square and make sure we have that proper progression in the proper order. All right, so now we're going to go get some clean water and we're going to switch things up. And instead of adding the white to the previously mixed middle gray, we're going to go the other way because when you try to mix white to a paint, it can be a bit of a struggle. Okay, you could go the opposite direction, but I really wanted to show you guys kind of the lighter end of things first, just to show that contrast. And so I'm adding my middle gray to my white, mixing it really, really well, and we're gonna go from the right to the left. And it looked really light on the palette, and this is one of those things you just start to learn and get used to. This is why the practicing is so important, because I actually, once I had it on there, on that white paper next to the white, it was definitely not as subtle as I wanted. And when you kind of compare that then to my value scale that I did with pencil, you can see how much more subtle that is. And what I ended up with here was almost like 3 shades down to that. It is okay. That is why we're doing these things. It's been a while since I did any kind of value scale, so I've really enjoyed doing that with these videos and kind of refreshing my brain on it. Usually I'm just painting and I'm mixing what I want as I'm going, you know. So this was definitely good for me to kind of remember some of these things as well and to go through the process, even with my distractions. So we're just going to keep going down the row, adding just a little bit of black to that, or a little bit of white, I'm so sorry, to that gray that we previously mixed. And we're going to fill in until we get to our middle square, just like we did before. So now we are right here at this point where I realized that I needed to add an extra bar. So I went ahead and did that, and I'm just going to erase where I put the complementary colors, and I'm going to take my lovely kneaded eraser. I love these things. If you don't have one, you should get one. They're great as a little fidget toy and they work wonders. You just pull them apart to clean them basically. But instead of the red plus green right here, I'm just going to put red, leave the red there because that is what we need in that spot. And just adjusting slightly, ever so slightly. But then on the bottom is going to be the complementary experiment. So red plus green. Green is the opposite of red on the color wheel, and that is going to be our complementary tinting experiment at the very bottom. And so then I thought it might be a good idea to go in and actually write down what we're doing on each one. So I actually end up starting with shade up here at the top. And you'll see that I make another mistake yet again in this video where I start to write value. So I pretend that I just wrote shade there. I realized that later. And then the next one, we're doing our tint, where we're going to be adding white and trying to get to our lightest red possible for this particular exercise. And then on the bottom, we're going to do our tone. I don't know why I didn't film that part. So shade, tint, and tone. And then if you want to also do the complementary colors, you can. And once you have whatever it is you want to have on your paper, we're going to move into our shading of the red. So we're going to do our red straight out of the tube in that very first square, fill it in nice and lovely. And then to shade, we're going to add just a tiny little bit of black each time as we go down the road, getting it a little darker. And you'll notice on this first one, it looks like it hardly made any change at all on the palette. And even when you start painting it, it might look like it's not quite a bit of difference, but once you get it all filled in, you can really see where it starts to darken. So this is why I keep saying during these color mixing videos, you kind of have to just trust the process, honestly. And just trust that you know you added a little bit more of a black or a white or a gray, and that it is going to change. But it is a fun experiment in seeing how subtly the colors change. And while I paint in all the rest of these squares, I just want to take a moment and apologize and sort of explain myself for what feels like a very chaotic video to me. I did have a plan, I promise, but it just, like, you'll notice as I move down, I end up getting a little bit messy as well, and it just, I don't know, it just becomes a little chaotic. This video took a long time to do, like, not just because of the painting, but because I still don't have a proper light. So I was kind of trying to work with the light situation in these winter months and having light, you know, that was good. And then also mom stuff and working on getting a new job, all those kind of things. So that is why the distraction so much in this. So I do apologize. Okay, and so now again, we're just, that first red square is our base red, just straight out of the tube, and now we're just gonna add a little bit of white to each square. We're gonna add a little bit of white paint to our red paint and paint all the way down. This time we're not adding the color to the white unless you wanted to start from the other end, but since we wanna see what that red looks like by itself, that's why I'm starting with the red. So if you wanted to do an experiment, I think I did that in the first video where I showed how to, like, if you add the color to the white, how you can get really, really pale colors. So just things to keep in mind. And here, I promise it's not glitching. I thought I was pausing the camera in between so that you wouldn't get bored watching me paint all of these squares and mix the color. But even once I realized I was editing and it was sped up, there are these pauses on these last few squares where clearly I did not hit the pause button. So this was part of my chaos this week. So again, apologies. I hope you guys are still benefiting from this and getting something out of this. We're all just human. We're all doing the best we can, right? So either way, I hope the point gets across. That's why I'm gonna add a bunch of music in my final editing of this so that at least there's some entertainment for you during all these moments. So now we are going to get into our toning, and to do the toning we're going to use the middle gray, or as close as we can get to it. I did not have enough gray left over or in a container that I could keep it even if I did, and so I'm just going to take about even amounts of black and white, mix them up again, and I think it's pretty close, if not exactly the same shade as the one we did before. So once again, we're just going to take our red and put that as our starting color in that very first box, and then just like with all the rest of them, we're going to add just a tiny little bit of that gray to each red as we go. And here is where I start getting just the ADHD kicked in right here. I don't know what the heck happened there. I think honestly I had been doing this kind of later in the day, but you can see just a little tiny bit of that middle gray. And so I was trying to do what I had tried to do in that last bar where I wanted to pause so that you guys weren't getting intensely bored. And there we go. That's another beauty right there. And I think I was just getting distracted and antsy. And at one point I realized I just needed to go for a walk because I think I was getting a little fidgety from sitting too long, and that did seem to help. But yes, there will be a couple of more oopsies along the way. The great thing about acrylic paint, just like I said before on my first oopsie, is that you can just paint over it. So that's what I end up doing. I make a big messy blurb on a few places, and then I just went back over it once after I had my walk and realized right there it is. I needed to get out the zoomies. So anyway, that's just a thought. Maybe you just need to get your zoomies out and return if you find something like this happening. So anyway, I'll stop rambling on. You guys get the process here, and I'll just play a little music for your enjoyment. So now to mix our complementary color, we need green. Green is the opposite of red, and so I just mixed up my green using about equal parts of yellow and blue from what I have until I got a green that I liked. Here we get this lovely brownish color that, you know, it's not terrible. I mean, it's actually one of my favorite complements just by itself. And so then all I'm gonna do is, like we've done before, just take a little bit of that white paint and mix it in and go down the row, lightening it up as we go, so you can see sort of that transition and where we end up getting all of these colors we like to term sort of tan or khaki or beige. You know, the sage greens come from complementary colors and so forth. And so if you guys want to see more of that, let me know. Maybe could do a video showing how to lighten all the complementary colors. And there we have it. We made it through our color chart here. And you can tell also looking at the grayscale, once you see how the difference between adding like the black color to the red versus adding the gray to the red, how it just sort of changes the tone of the color just a little bit. So that can be purposeful depending, you know, how you want to shade your image, what you're working on. But it also, this is a way to start recognizing colors and understanding how to get them, right? So when you realize that pink, you don't have to buy pink in a tube, you can just get some red paint and some white paint and get the pink, the very, very shade of pink that you want, right? And we're gonna ignore that big blob right there. And then also the complementary colors, like once you start recognizing which complements make what sort of tones and shades, that gives you more control over, you know, even those lighter colors that you're looking for. If you're trying to get a pale sort of sage green versus what a pale green looks like, or a, you know, just it's just part of the process. It's part of the learning. So I hope that's starting to become a little clear, and I hope that made sense. I hope that was helpful to you guys. I know there were a few bumps along the way with like my brain just being a little distracted during the process, but you get the idea of what happens with these color mixing processes. I hope you guys enjoyed this little series. I enjoyed making it. It gave me some time to just do something a little bit zen and, you know, without having to, I don't know, without having to stress about creating a finished piece, I guess, just kind of getting in there and mixing the paint and playing with the paint again. I enjoyed that. So let me know what you thought of this. If if there's other questions you have about paint mixing and color mixing or other techniques in art that maybe I am able to help with. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you like creative and crafty things, please consider subscribing to my channel. I'll be doing many, many more videos to come, and I will see you guys soon. Have a great day. Go forth, be crafty, create, do all the wonderful creative things. Bye guys. See you soon.